Hello and welcome to Americans Learn. My name is Colin, and today I'm watching France's failed 1939 invasion of Germany from the Armchair Historian. Have I seen anything from Armchair Historian before? I don't think so. I'm looking at some of the imagery, and the thumbnails, they look kind of familiar, but nothing is coming to mind, but then again, I do have a terrible memory, so there's that. But yeah, I'm definitely not familiar with France's failed 1939 invasion of Germany. I don't think I'd ever learned of that. I don't think. It's certainly not ringing a bell, so I'm coming at this new, I guess. So, with that being said, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll bring this up into the share screen, and let's dive right in, shall we?
It is the fall of 1939, and of Poland. Marshal Eduard Ritz-Schmigli meets with his staff. Though the Poles fight with all the zeal they can muster, the Germans continue to gain ground. The young republic is firmly on the back foot, teetering over the precipice. Ritz-Schmigli assures his subordinates that they only have to hold out long enough for the French and British to muster their forces. The twin empires will sweep into Germany from the west, and between them, the three allies will surely crush the Nazis and save Poland. Hi, I'm Griffin Johnson, the Armchair Historian. Even casual observers will know that Marshal Ritz-Schmigli's faith in his French and British allies was, shall we say, misplaced. Poland fell to the combined invasion of Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union as France and Britain looked on, seemingly uncaringly. But history continues to resist simplicity, and the German invasion would set off a chain of events that would lead to a French invasion of Germany in 1939. An invasion pushed into the margins of history by its utter irrelevance in the face of the French defeat the following year. In this video, we will turn our attention to those margins and examine the Saar offensive, France's failed invasion of Nazi Germany.
So right off the bat, I do not think I've ever seen anything from this YouTube channel before, because this host is not looking familiar to me. I'm not sure. Did he say what his name was? I'm so sorry if he said what his name was, but yeah. So, but it's looking good. Looks like a great introduction. So I'm hooked. Let's continue moving forward, shall we?
While the performance of the French military early in the Second World War is often the subject of much mockery, their contributions to the field of cryptology are often overlooked. French cryptologists were among the first to break the famous Enigma machine, working in close cooperation with Polish and British colleagues to give the Allies a decisive advantage in the information war against the Axis powers.
Wait, I thought that was Alan Turing that cracked the Enigma machine, was it not? Or were they able to, maybe before his machine, were they able to at least decipher some of them? Maybe just slower, far slower than was, like, useful. Anyway, let's keep going.
This brings us neatly to the sponsor of today's video, NordVPN, whose industry-leading cybersecurity features promise to keep your classified data safe from any military rivals. Now, every subscription to NordVPN comes with access to the Threat Protection feature, which actively neutralizes cyber threats before they can damage your devices. Threat Protection warns you of malware and malicious websites, while blocking intrusive ads and making your internet experience safer, smoother, and more secure. Support our channel today, get an exclusive deal, and try NordVPN risk-free for 30 days with their money-back guarantee by signing up with the link in the description below. French Prime Minister Édouard Daladier and Foreign Minister Georges Bonnet received word of the Nazi invasion on September 1st, the morning after it had begun. France had a defensive treaty with Poland, but when the Polish ambassador Juliusz Łukasiewicz called to personally alert Bonnet to the danger his country faced, Bonnet had only bad news to share. The French Constitution prohibited France from going to war with Germany or even presenting Hitler with a last-ditch ultimatum with
Wait, it was in their constitution that they couldn't go to war with Germany? When did they establish that? Was that part of the French Revolution? I feel like I should know this because I did do a React series on the French Revolution, or yeah, French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars. And I have terrible memory, so I don't remember.
Without the input of the French legislature, most of whom were on holiday. Bonnet told Łukasiewicz the fate of his country would have to wait until the next day, when the French lawmakers would reconvene. As September 1st dragged into September 2nd, the Nazis drove deeper into Poland, while the traditionally bellicose Duce of Italy, Benito Mussolini, began calling loudly for a summit to resolve the Polish issue diplomatically. Bonnet echoed Mussolini's calls, angering British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain and Foreign Secretary Lord Halifax. French Chief of Staff Maurice Gamelin wrote in his diary that the British were insisting that hostilities should begin as soon as possible in order to give some useful assistance to Poland without delay. They feared, I believe, that we would hesitate at the last moment. In reality, the French had already begun mobilizing their forces, but Gamelin and his staff pushed their Prime Minister and Bonnet for time to organize an evacuation of French citizens along the German border. Should war break out now, it would be the French army and people who would bear the brunt of it, until the British could deploy to the continent, which meant days of fighting before even the smallest group of Tommies arrived. And so, even as the British pushed for an immediate response, Axis and Allied diplomats exchanged furious cables, the Luftwaffe rained bombs on Polish cities, and the Wehrmacht drove deep into the embattled young republic. The French played for time as they organized their side of the chessboard. September 3rd would see the die cast for war. As an initial Polish defense at Mława collapsed, the talks between the diplomats were ended by French ambassador to Germany, Robert Coulanges, who informed Joachim von Ribbentrop that at 5 p.m. that day, France and Germany would be at war unless hostile action against Poland ceased. Gamelin, still desperate for time, gave a secret order that all branches of the French armed forces were to adopt a war footing at 5 a.m. September 4th, a full 12 hours after the declaration, and when the British RAF would begin moving against German targets. It should be noted that Gamelin's seeming gun shyness was not shared by the French people. They regarded war with Germany as a sense of dutiful determination. Over 4.5 million Frenchmen were called up in the mobilization, and they evinced high spirits and a desire to stop German aggression. Those on the home front were similarly tired of Nazi expansionism. Il faut en finir, or enough is enough, became a refrain among the civilian population. However, there were some who foresaw calamity should France go to war with Germany. Nazi sympathizers and French fascists warned anyone who would listen that to stand against Hitler was to court destruction. The vast majority of the French people were confident of victory, however, and these contrarian fascists were paid little mind. France formally went to war on September 3rd, but despite her extensive mobilization, popular history tells us little else actually happened until Germany invaded in 1940, a period of months known as the Sitzkrieg, or Phony War. This characterization is entirely untrue. Not only was the Polish invasion ongoing with Krakow falling on September 6th, but the French would do something completely unexpected. Back in May of 1939, Gamelin had assured his Polish counterparts that a German invasion would be answered with French military action, promising that it would take 2 weeks at the most for the cavalry to arrive. But behind closed doors, Gamelin told the British, who were equally entangled with the Poles, that he did not intend to discourage his men by launching offensives willy-nilly, stating, "I shall not begin the war by a Battle of Verdun." This reflected a shift toward defensive warfare in the minds of French military planners, as evidenced by the construction of the Maginot Line. But France had a duty to perform, and Gamelin may have been a cautious man, but he did not go back on his nation's word. On September 7, 1939, as the Polish High Command fled the Nazi advance on Warsaw, and after much build-up and consideration, Gamelin ordered a French invasion of Germany. The night of the 7th would see 11 French divisions pour over the German border on a 15-mile or roughly 24-kilometer front southeast of Saarbrücken, dubbed the Kadenbronn Salient, with the goal of drawing German forces away from Poland. A second wave was launched on the 9th, and the reinforced French would advance slowly into Nazi territory. Resistance was light, and the French primarily had to contend with minefields and booby traps that inflicted relatively low casualties. But when battle was joined, it was intense, reminding many of the invaders of the First World War. Corporal Armand Petitjean wrote of spending 3 days under mortar fire while taking shelter in a water pipe 80 centimeters below ground and knee-deep in the mud. If the ceiling collapses, we are stuck. Perhaps taking a page from their chief of staff's book, Doctrine on the Ground called for caution above all, a mindset that helped reduce losses, but this risk aversion also took root in the French government at large, reducing effectiveness as much as it did casualties. Prime Minister Daladier vigorously vetoed any RAF moves to bomb Germany, fearful that the Luftwaffe would visit destruction on Paris. Winston Churchill presented a plan dubbed Royal Marine to float naval mines down the Rhine, damaging shipping and infrastructure, until Daladier again protested in fear the Germans would do the same to the Seine. The hamstrung RAF would ultimately bomb Germany with a torrent of highly destructive leaflets, as the half-hearted offensive half-intensified. Meanwhile, a second French thrust was launched.
What did those leaflets say? Did they say? Did I miss that?
To the Seine. The hamstrung RAF would ultimately bomb Germany with a torrent of highly destructive leaflets, as the half-hearted offensive half-intensified. Meanwhile, a second...
So, like, yeah, what do those leaflets say? What kind of, like, taunting or, I don't know, brutal messages were they sending? Like that. And, I don't know, I'm wondering, do people still fight wars kind of, I don't know, drop leaflets like that somehow? I mean, I know that there's other ways of disseminating messages and whatnot with social media and whatnot, but I don't know. I think, like, if I were in war and the enemy was flying over, like, at being known for also dropping bombs, and instead they drop pieces of paper that, like, I don't know, depending on what the message is, that could be pretty intimidating to me. I don't know. Kind of spooky looking. Also, you know, it makes just a big mess that you have to clean up. So, I don't know.
Second French thrust was launched in the west of Germany, with the 21st Motorized Infantry taking extensive territory, occupying the heights around Biel and woodlands around Saarbrücken. This new group brought the French up to a staggering 85 divisions in the region, against which the German had arrayed 34, with a full 23 of them being reservist divisions with little training nor equipment. Panzer divisions and motorized infantry were all in Poland, giving the French absolute dominance in the armor and maneuverability stakes. The French occupied a position that would make any general green with envy, poised to push deep into enemy territory with as little resistance as an elephant would face in stomping on a ground-bound sloth. The French continued to advance cautiously until September 12th, when Gamelin gave his men a fateful order. They would take the momentum of their advance and utterly squander it. Gamelin ordered a complete halt to offensive operations September 12th. He further ordered his men to prepare for an immediate retreat, as he had become convinced that a German counterattack through Belgium was imminent. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union would invade Poland on September 17th, sealing the fate of the young republic and showing the world that Hitler and Stalin were all too happy to glut themselves on the independence of other nations. The sudden stop in even these paltry attacks incensed Gamelin's subordinates. Charles de Gaulle, future Free French president and commander of an armored group in the anemic offensive, called the effort a few demonstrations. André Beaufry, noted strategist, railed that the operation was nothing. General Gamelin, true to character, decided to make no more than a gesture. That was our aid to Poland. By the time Gamelin ordered an end to the offensive operations, the Nazis had been laying siege to the Polish capital of Warsaw for 4 days, a siege that would ultimately end on September 28th. Perhaps with the Nazis at the gates of the Polish capital, Gamelin thought that the fall of Poland was inevitable, and this played into his decision to bring the French invasion to a halt. Regardless of its genesis, Gamelin would take his logic to Dalady, who gave his begrudging assent to the shift to a defensive posture. The men decided not to inform the rest of Dalady's cabinet about the decision, and an immediate withdrawal from Germany was ordered in the utmost secrecy. Troops were only withdrawn under the cover of darkness, and a screening force left in contact with the enemy to give the illusion of continued battle. German troops began to return from conquering Poland toward the end of September, reinforcing their fellows and launching the counteroffensive that Gamelin so dreaded. The Polish government in exile arrived in Paris on September 28th. Nazi and Soviet forces would complete the latest partition of Poland on October 6th, and the French would complete their evacuation of the Saar region on October 17th, with the Germans hot on their heels and eager to take a retaliatory bite out of France. The Wehrmacht recovered every inch of territory seized in the French effort, but their attempts to go into France were largely unsuccessful. With the status quo antebellum largely restored, the phony war could well and truly begin. Fighting largely ceased until the German invasion of France in May of 1940. The Saar offensive was more than a strategic failure. It laid bare the critical flaws in the French army, and most critically, its highest commander. Gamelin was a man obsessed with defense, unwilling to commit to anything but a perfunctory offense. The timidity with which he treated the Saar operations, in which he enjoyed unquestioned superiority in men and materiel until the literal last minutes, utterly confounded the Germans. Alfred Jodl declared, "If we did not collapse in 1939, that was due to the fact that during the Polish campaign, the approximately 110 French and British divisions in the West were held completely inactive against the 23 German divisions." General Siegfried Westphal, aide to Erwin Rommel, and later...
Yeah, it really does make me wonder, how quickly could World War II have ended if France had been a little more aggressive or more successful in this campaign.
Chief of Staff for von Rundstedt wrote that if the French had actually tried, they could have blazed from the French border to the Rhine River in 2 weeks. This sentiment was shared by Franz Halder, Chief of Army High Command, who opined, if the French had used the opportunity presented by the engagement of nearly all of our forces in Poland, they would have been able to cross the Rhine without our being able to prevent it, and would have threatened the Ruhr, which was decisive for the German conduct of the war. Gamelin was well and truly presented with an opportunity to change the course of history and let it pass him by. Gamelin's passivity would have repercussions throughout the French army. The men who marched into the Saar were, as said before, in high spirits and ready to counteract Nazi aggression. But as they found their offensive stalling out due to not enemy effort but their commander's apparent caution, morale plummeted. Inaction was the primary factor cited, and it created an atmosphere of depression and carelessness. The French had come to strike back, defend Poland, and stop Hitler once and for all. Instead, they were marching from deserted village to deserted village, wandering through minefields and occasionally meeting some intense but limited German resistance. French casualties totaled 1,878 for the operation, while the Germans acknowledged a total of 666, a relatively low number compared to the rest of the war. A war that the Nazis would soon bring to France's doorstep, and the Germans would prove far more aggressive than the toothless French under Gamelin. Between the end of the Saar offensive and the fall of France, the Allies would do little more than mark time. Modern historians cite this period of inaction as a critical blunder, a time in which the Allies could have refined their strategies and built up materiel as the Germans did. Whether this was simple war weariness, some mistaken belief that Hitler was finally sated, or disbelief that another conflict was inevitable is debated to this day. What we can say is that the Saar offensive was an utter failure, succeeding in penetrating German territory and placing the French in a position to well and truly take the war to Hitler, only to collapse under the weight of its commander's fear. Could the French have ended the Second World War in its opening months? Could an Anglo-French force, riding the momentum of a vigorous offensive in the Saar region, come up behind the Wehrmacht as they arrayed their full strength against Poland, and brought the Bronze Eagle crashing down to earth? That's a question for the alternate historians out there.
Well, that's, I don't know, kind of depressing, I guess. You know, because like, oh, God, how many millions of lives could have been spared if they had successfully fought back Germany in 1939? Man, that's a bummer. How did I not know that or like forget about that? Because like I knew that that France was invaded, but I like completely forgot that if I had ever learned about it, I forgot about this particular uh failed invasion. Um, Man, like trying to imagine all the ways in which history could have played out differently if France's invasion was successful. I don't know. I really don't know. I like my brain is going through all sorts of speculation. I don't even know where to even begin. Man, that's kind of fascinating though. So if there are any alternative historians out there who've, I don't know, where it's more, I guess it is all fiction, you know, fan fiction kind of, I don't know, fan fiction, but speculation. It's all speculation, but I don't know. I'm taking into account people's sentiments at the time, you know, because even a lot of Americans before German joining World War II were kind of sympathetic to Germany. At least that's been like my impression. Unfortunately, I mean there was that big American Nazi rally in New York. I can't remember what year, sometime in the 30s. Um, so like if World War II had not progressed and therefore also the news of the genocide that was occurring in Germany, uh, like if that had, because how far along in the Holocaust were they at this point? Like how far along were the concentration camps? Um, because I knew it was like it was a build up. It took time for them to get there, like full ramping and the final solution. Um, but maybe if it wasn't too far into all of that in 1939, maybe you know, people seeing news of it might not have been quite so horrifying, and maybe the issues with anti-Semitism in today's society would be much worse than they are currently. You know, it at least the way that World War II and that period of history was taught to me, it certainly seemed like after fighting Nazis and the horrors of what was going on in those concentration camps were coming to light, that yeah, like people were, it was very obvious, anti-Semitism and Nazism is not good for the world. um I don't know that. So again, seems like a very long speculative kind of rant or rambling that I could be going down here, and I think this would be much more worthwhile to have this like a conversation with people, in person. I think I've said that a few times, but yeah, just talking aloud to myself into a microphone at people uh, who will eventually be seeing this feels a little weird. Um, so I don't know. I need someone to bounce thoughts and ideas off of. I guess. Anywho, I hope you enjoyed learning that along with me. And I guess my ending ramblings there at some point. But yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and see you in the next one.